Awesome. What is up, everyone? I want to welcome you all here to today's event. We'll say this out of the gates. I know it is extremely challenging for everyone to carve out time out of your day to sit through an hour event. So do appreciate that. And also, if you are watching the recording, thanks for taking some time to learn a little bit from us and our speakers. My name is Brett McGrath. I lead marketing at The Juice. I'm really excited about the topic today of how to answer what's the ROI of our content marketing program. This is a question that continues to come up in conversations that I have with other marketers. And I figured what better way to hit it on its head than to bring up, four smart marketing leaders to discuss it. So a little bit about the format before we get in. So we're going to have 10 4-minute sessions. It's going to be rapid fire. We're going to have fun, but all of the content in each of those sessions will map up to this question. So I'm going to introduce the speakers, but maybe before we do that, Kat, I know we've got a poll, and I'm curious to kind of get the audience, get some perspective from the audience on which best describes how content marketing is valued at your company. So if you answer that question, get some gauge on who we're all working with and who's all out in the audience, I do appreciate that. And maybe now we'll get into the introduction of speakers. So let's move to the next slide. All right. I'm up, and shout out to Kat, by the way. Kat runs our customer success and is also the behind the scenes brains behind the operation. So helping us all move smoothly. So just want to shout out Kat. But today's speakers, we will have Nate Turner, who's the co-founder and CEO at 10Speed. 10Speed is a content optimization agency doing some really great work. He's going to be talking about how to maximize the value of your content. He spent time spinning up Sprout Social's inbound engine, and think there'll be a ton of value you'll learn from him. We've got probably the furthest speaker away from most of us, and who's up with us late tonight is Thomas Peham. He is the vice president of marketing at Storyblok. Thomas is from Austria, so he's coming at us live from Austria, and he's going to be talking about how to grow your pipeline with content. And then a guy who probably doesn't need much introduction. I'm sure if you've been to a marketing show or have watched a event recently or listened to a podcast, you've probably heard or seen him. But Sangram Vajre, who is the co-founder and CEO at GTM Partners, who's also an author of a book. I think it came out about a year ago. It seems like maybe longer, of Move, the 4-question go-to-market strategy. We're going to be talking about how content can help connect a broken go-to-market strategy. And we're going to kick things off with Amrita Mathur, who's the vice president of marketing at Superside. Superside is an incredible brand. I love seeing their content. I love going to their website. It's very vibrant, and it makes you feel good. And she's got a ton of experience, and she's going to be talking about trade-offs between immediate and long-term conversion with content. Before we bring her up on the stage, I do want to share. Go to social, go to Twitter, go to the Twitter machine, share your thoughts. I think the thing I love the most about these sorts of things is like the aftermath of pulling up Twitter and seeing what people said. So if one of the speakers says something that inspires you, you think it's a good take, share that. Tag them, tag the juice, tag myself, follow me. I'll follow you back. We'll do that whole song and dance, but would appreciate the engagement there. I think that is it for all of the housekeeping and plugs. Maybe if we could bring Amrita to the stage and kick things off. Amrita, welcome. How are you?
Good. Nervous to talk about this topic because it comes with so much baggage, you know?
It does. You've got some fans in the chat. I'm seeing someone say loves Superside's approach to content. So you've got some fans to hopefully make you feel comfortable as we get things going.
Cool. I know Spencer. Hey, hi Mitangi. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I feel like we're doing something right, and we know a lot about content, but it's not without its challenges for sure. And it continues to be a challenge no matter which company I'm at. So I think, before we dive into this, I want to acknowledge two things. One is that, can we all just acknowledge that measuring anything with the same yardstick is like just downright stupid? Like, it just makes no sense. And yet we as marketers kind of tend to do that. Sometimes our CEOs do that, right? Our business does that to push us in a certain direction. So I think we need to acknowledge that. I think this is very broad strokes, but like if you measure content marketing, which is like the slow burn track, as I call it, and put that against something like performance marketing, which is the fast track, obviously it's not apples to apples. It's a totally different dynamic. It's a totally different messaging style. The platforms are often different. How you pull people in is often different. So very different tracks. So let's just acknowledge that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is kind of like the other side of the coin is that I've maybe myself been that person, but I've also met a lot of marketers who are like this, who think content marketing is about growing your brand and creating a halo. And eventually when people are ready, they'll buy from you. And it's like, yeah, it is, but it's also about revenue, right? It's a stepping stone to getting your buyer to understand why they should pay attention, what is the actual problem, why they should care about it, and why they should care about it now, right? That's really what good content marketing is. So I just want to that's like the preamble. I'm sorry, but I just want to.
Man, I'm fired up. Like, that is such a great way to kick things off. You're making my job easier. I didn't even have to ask anything, and you just went to town. So I love that, and I think we're gonna hit on some of those things. So maybe just the idea of content taking time, and like we all know, successful content strategies take time. I guess like the marketer understands this, but I'm curious, like from your perspective, like how are we supposed to be setting expectations with our stakeholders when we're talking about the content strategy that we're building, so we're not setting up ourselves for failure right out of the gates?
Yeah, I think it depends on the maturity of the org, and also the business model of the org really matters, right? If your company business model is highly product-led growth, it requires a different content approach. If it's highly like a sales-led approach, it requires a different content approach, so on and so forth, if you're doing a combination, etc. So I think keeping that in mind, right? Like, you can't just take your content playbook from a different company and apply it to this company. You got to take the business model in mind, know that, figure that out, and talk with your stakeholders with that model in mind. Like, hey, sales, here's how this is going to help. Hey, CFO person, this is how this is going to help, or CEO, or whatever, whoever your stakeholders are. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is the world has changed, and we ourselves, I think, may not fully recognize the change. Like, I've just noticed such a huge shift in how I buy. Like, when was the last time I bought anything off a blog post? Like, probably been a solid 5-10 years. I don't think, like, I love giving this example because it's like we spent so many dollars on this, but we bought this really expensive tool called 6 Sense for our ABM approach. I don't think I read any of their content. Maybe late stages after we were in evaluation, they sent us some stuff, right? But I didn't find them on a blog post and was like, oh my God, this blew my mind, right? Like, I already know what my problem is. And now I've gone and found out, who the right players are, et cetera, et cetera. And of course they influenced our rubric, et cetera. So I think the world has changed. I think that so much of, at least in B2B, my context is B2B, but so much of our opinions are formed on offsite channels. And I personally feel like offsite is where the money and the eyeballs are, and that's where you invest. And I've figured out what that approach is and why I think like that, and gathered some data and shown that to the rest of the company when I ask for a budget at the start of the year or whatever it is, right? It's like, hey, thank you for all this budget. Here's all the bodies. We're shifting dramatically. The offsite content is like what I said to our CEO, right? Here's why. Here's how people are buying these days. Here's what's happening. I look at my own behavior, so on and so forth. So I think that upfront context setting is really helpful at the start of the year, perhaps, maybe at the start of like a quarter, whatever your cycle is for planning. And I think the second thing is again, every company is different, but if your cadence for sharing metrics, whether it's, impact of marketing, whatever that cadence is, like for example, at Superside, we do a monthly OKR meeting, and all the GTM teams and all the other teams present. And that's where I always do the reset, right? I take that opportunity not just to report on the numbers, like sure, that's part of it, but it's like really helping everyone understand why. Like, why are we doing this? What does this number mean? What is the impact of that? What is the change coming based on that? And that's where the mind changing actually happens. So that's my advice, I guess, in a nutshell.
I hear a lot of like the importance of internal showcasing, internal marketing, making sure you're setting the right expectations with your stakeholders. I feel like I learn a lot from just reading your LinkedIn posts. And if you're not following Amrita on LinkedIn, go do that, because you'll get some free advice. But something you wrote was, good B2B marketing is keeping people in the ecosystem until they're ready to buy. It's really that simple. And you said a bunch of other things, but I'm curious, like, how should we be thinking about content in that simple scenario that you describe?
Yeah, I think I know that LinkedIn post did really well, but I actually think people misinterpreted. I wasn't saying throw your hands up in the air and don't do anything about it, and just like, it's not as simple as just putting your brand in front of people over and over. It's kind of like what I said in my rant earlier, which is you really have to figure out how to put your brand in front of people over and over, but serving the right type of content to the right person in that buyer journey. You might have a sophisticated system to figure out, here's all my buyer personas. Some of them are unknown, some of them are known and cookied. I kind of know where they are in the buyer journey. And now I'm going to put you on a certain track to experience, unfolding this problem space in that way. And I think that thoughtful approach is absolutely necessary. And if you do that well and keep testing and experimenting, eventually people will be like, oh yeah, I totally have this problem. I should go look at so-and-so company. This happened in that LinkedIn post. I gave this example, and I'll just talk about it aloud. This company, Hotjar, there was a guy who was just like, I'm having this problem. I can't I don't have creative fast enough, and I'm not able to put out my content fast enough because the creative is either shitty or it's just not happening. And I'm just waiting for months for it to happen. And our creative team is overloaded. So he goes to his manager and says, what do I do? And the manager says, oh, I think you should look at a design subscription company like Superside, right? So the beauty of that statement is the manager didn't have an innate need. He never came to us and booked a demo or anything like that. But when the problem arose, he said, he's triaged in his head. Oh, I don't need a freelancer. Oh, I don't need an agency. Oh, I need a design subscription company. Maybe the way that this guy described the problem, right? And he's like, go check out Superside. And that turned into opportunity and closed one deal. That's good content marketing, because this guy, we've been able to influence and build mindshare with him probably over a period of years. I tried to look him up in HubSpot to see who the hell this guy is and what have we done, right? I couldn't fully discern that, but that's good content marketing.
I shout out the 6 Sense, shout out Hotjar, HubSpot. Amrita's plugging everybody right now. So let's talk a little bit about just like the conversion component, that because I know you're super passionate about that when it comes to content. Is there like defining the difference between demand capture and demand creation? Like, is there a difference from a content perspective on, how we should be, thinking about content's role in each of those strategies?
Yeah, 100%. Those terms are also come with their own baggage, right? So they're a little bit rudimentary, and it's like a lot of people that will say, oh, you can't really create demand. There's no such thing. There has to be latent demand. But I've just told you this Hotjar story to illustrate that it is possible. The guy wasn't looking for something. It just, when the problem fell in his lap, he knew exactly where to go, right? I think that if you're a startup, and I experienced this with Superside when we were early and didn't quite have product market fit, and we're trying to figure that out, we were just picking off the low-hanging fruit. So we were capturing all the latent demand. For us, what that meant was a company or a team that we sold to, or buyer persona we sold to, that had a very specific need in mind. We were just picking those off. So as an example, Facebook was one of our first big customers, and they literally had like this new widget or component they were rolling out, I think banners for events or something, and they needed like something like 10,000 graphics. So the volume play, right? They couldn't possibly do that internally. It wasn't cost effective to do that internally. So they looked for a subscription company like Superside to do that. But that was an easy win because there was a very clear need and desire and a project almost that had a budget line item. That is demand capture. Demand creation is when they don't have that and you're still able to reel them in, right? You're still able to be like, you're doing things poorly or whatever it is, and show them what the better way is. So as you get mature as a company, you kind of need to shift into demand capture mode because your market is absolutely not going to be large enough for you to just pick off the low-hanging fruit forever and ever. There's just going to be, the markets are finite. So you kind of have to educate a lot in order to create that. And content marketing, again, I feel like, there's this great Animals post about it. Animals is like this content marketing agency, actually, and I'm plugging them too. Wow. They had this really great post that was written a few years ago, and they kind of have this diagram, and I wish I'd pulled it up, but it's sort of like they always advise, like, start at the core, start at like the absolute, like the content that is like core to your business, very close to your product, really explains like what is it about that specific use case or 2 or 3 use cases, and really start there and then start to branch out and go up. It's like if you look at an onion, it's like start at the core and then peel the onion backwards rather than the other way around, which I think is really smart if you're starting out and trying to figure out what the investments are. That makes total sense to me. But then when you move into demand capture or demand creation mode and you need to do all this awareness and audience building, that's when it's the outer layer of the onion. And that requires a different style of content marketing and a different investment entirely.
You dropped just so many nuggets in this like 10 to 12 minute time frame that hopefully everyone out there has got their notepad out and is taking notes from these words of wisdom. So I'm getting cues. We've got to move along to Thomas, but Amrita will bring you back on for Q&A. Appreciate everything you shared here.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If you have questions, drop them in the Q&A. We will get to those. We've started off with a bang there. A lot of energy and passion from Amrita. Excited to talk with Thomas. Thomas, you out there?
Hey, Brad, can you hear me?
There we go. There we go. How are you?
I'm fine. I think I just need 3 more espressos to keep up with that energy.
Yeah, no kidding. And especially it's a little bit, what time do we got in Austria right now?
Well, it's 7:30, close to 7:30 p.m. here, but it's all good.
I love it. We got a chance to catch up on an episode of Modern Day Marketer, and I think there's so much that marketers can learn from, like, your experience in the way you're thinking about growth and content and pipeline creation at Storyblok, and you leading the charge. So I want to get into some of that. Maybe we start here. Like, how do you, what I learned from you was so much of what you all were doing was built around this content culture. So I'm curious, like, how do we create a culture of content and make sure that the content that we're spending all this time building fits that culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely recall our podcast episode where we spoke so much about the culture and the mindset kind of part of content marketing. And I think the reason we spoke back then so much about it is I advise a lot of SaaS businesses, and I did that a lot in my previous roles before joining Storyblok as VP of marketing. So don't get me wrong, if you're listening to this, I love content marketing. That's my background. That's where I come from. I'm doing content basically since 2013, 2014 for various SaaS businesses. But the very first thing that I always advise startups, scale-ups, when they approach me and ask me about content marketing and what's the ROI of content marketing and when is the right point and time to start content marketing efforts, I always say, well, stop for a second. It's a culture topic. It's a culture and mindset topic. And you've chatted with Amrita about the measurability part, and you really have to go one step back and think about content marketing as in, does it fit your company culture, right? And if you're a startup, if you're just starting, you have to ask yourself, does content marketing fit our culture as founders? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it is so much founder-led if you're a small startup. It's a company culture topic, because maybe content and content marketing is not the right fit for you. So one of the things I always ask founders as a start is, how comfortable do you feel putting yourself out there as writers, as podcast hosts, as whatever format it really is, and tell your story, right? Tell that story first, because if that doesn't fit right, I'm sure it also might not be the best fit for your company to hire a marketer to get started with content marketing, because ultimately it's very hard in the beginning to measure a direct ROI from every single content piece. And I wouldn't advise to do that anyhow. But if you're a founder where it doesn't fit you or your culture, you probably start questioning content marketing way too soon, and you're not giving it enough room to grow. And you won't be happy ultimately with your content marketing efforts, because at the end of the day, obviously it's also a strategy question, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you really have to look at content marketing also in that sense, and see how it fits your mindset around your founder-led perspective. The marketing, is it a marketing-led SaaS business you're running? Is it a sales-led, product-led? So obviously you also have to look at those go-to-market motions, but start with you as a founder, start with you as the people in your company, and how content and how content marketing resonates.
Let's talk a little bit about Storyblok. I know just in my research, talking with you, seeing the numbers, like Storyblok has been able to scale quickly. Curious on your end, like what has the role of content been as not only the marketing team, but just the company in general has grown?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for all of you who do not know Storyblok is a headless content management system. So we are a CMS, right? So content is part of our DNA, because as a content management system, we manage content. We provide a software solution for 110,000 developers and marketers globally these days to host their content, be it content for websites, mobile apps, or other front-end experiences. We just recently published a case study around Tesla hosting point of sale content within Storyblok as a CMS. But to go to your point, content sits really at the foundation of everything we do. And Storyblok was started in 2017 by two developers, Dominic and Alex, as a remote company. And both of them come from a development background. And one of the first things they did, supernaturally, both of them are not really marketers and weren't really that familiar. They started to educate the market, because back in 2017, the whole market category of headless CMS, yes, it was a growing market category, but it was not that really known to a larger audience. So what Dominic and Alex did since day one was they put themselves out there. They created tutorials, they created content, they put them on conferences for developers and share their knowledge around building Storyblok as a content management system. And that really led to the first organic growth. And all the content marketers out there, we love organic growth, right? And how that compounds and how that helps us scale. So between 2017 and 2020, that is all they did. Zero marketing invest on any paid channel. Actually, there was no marketing team up until 2020, but it was just them publicly creating Storyblok. And back in 2020, we were about, I think, 25 people on the whole company. Dominic reached out to me asking for some content marketing advice on how to start building the inbound marketing side of things at Storyblok. And we started talking back then. And now, fast forward to 2 years, we now have a marketing team of 30 people being spread across demand gen, branded comms, fully owning inbound pipeline. And the whole company is now at 240 people, something like that.
That's insane. I think what I learned from listening to you respond to that question is get your founders involved in content early and often, because I'm sure it makes the decisions that you have to make when you're thinking about investing. It makes it resonate, and it makes it more easy for them to push forward or get support any content initiatives that you're running.
Sure. I mean, you need natural buy-in from your key stakeholders, be it the CEO, be it the founders, and yeah, you don't want to be busy reporting every few days, every few weeks back up if content marketing does really make sense. So yeah, you need full buy-in on that. Otherwise, it wouldn't really work.
I want to hit the question I have about technology before we get some Nate up here. But what's the role of content technology, and how should technology support your pipeline and business goals? You're a content technology company. I'm sure you have some perspective on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're exposed to that question on a daily basis because when our customers, be it in the tech space, in e-commerce space, approach us, most often technology limits them. The marketing team, the content team feels limited by the technology they use. And the limits we see there is time to market. As marketing teams, we rely on fast deployment cycles. We need technology that helps us publish content fast, no matter the channel, right? So time to market is really critical, and unfortunately, there are a lot of systems out there that aren't really ideal on that. The second part is we're in 2023, right? There's not only websites we need to maintain as marketers. We have social, we have mobile, we have AR, VR environments, we have voice. You might have mobile apps, you might even have smart watch apps. So how do you deploy, how do you publish content on all of those different channels in a very fast, reliable manner, right? That's still a big challenge. And one of the key aspects we see there around technology is that we believe that content should sit in central places, right? Because if content is siloed in multiple technologies, in multiple content hubs, your team will be inefficient. Your team will be busy copy pasting content from one system to another. So we really believe in one central content hub that allows marketing teams. But beyond marketing, there are many other teams involved in content and content management and content marketing, right? So we as marketers sometimes forget that because we think we're the only ones managing and publishing content. But anyhow, at the end of the day, the impact as a technology is definitely also around single source of content management and how that enables teams to be faster and more productive. And we actually will publish a report and a study next week around what's the ROI of a content technology for content marketers, because it's sometimes crazy to think that we spend so much money on paid ads, on performance marketing, on other crazy marketing stunts, but we've totally forgot, or not forget, but don't focus on the technology part on it, on how an invest in technology also helps us accelerate with our pipeline goals. And I think there are various studies out there, and I don't want to quote them too much, but at the end of the day, you need to dedicate a certain percentage of your marketing spend also towards technology, because technology is not only an enabler, but also helps you reach those pipeline goals that you set out there.
I'm excited to check out that report. Email it to me when it goes live so I make sure I see it. I'm sure there's some good nuggets in there
100%.
that we can plug in our content. Thomas, this was awesome. We'll see you back up on stage for Q&A. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brad.
All right, we have Nate coming on. If you have any questions, I'm going to plug it again. Drop them on. But we are ready to talk with Nate Turner from 10 Speed.
Hey,
Nate,
Brett.
welcome.
Thank you. Hey, I think before we get started, I do want to mention, just to kind of build on one thing that Thomas was saying, that I think one of the panelists is actually between me and my team pretty hands-on in content strategy for dozens of SaaS companies, as well as in the data. And I get asked a fair amount, like, what's the number one thing that drives success, for companies in their content program? And I wanted to build on what he said. Like, I tell people all the time, it's actually something that most marketers can't control. It's the overall culture around that and the leadership's buy-in on that inherently, because anytime you have to kind of try to be swimming upstream all the time to convince people why you should be doing it or why it's working, it's just not nearly as successful as when there's buy-in from the start. So I love that. I just wanted to build on that. I think it's extremely true, and we see it all the time.
I love that to kick it off. And I think just as content people, like there's been this evolution. And at first it was like, all right, we're going to try a bunch of things, take a trial and error approach to our content marketing strategy and see what works. Then content marketing has certainly gotten more sophisticated, where now, like, I'm sure marketers that you're talking to, like, are hearing from their boss or boss's boss, like, how can we tie this work back to revenue and like show evidence that this is actually directly having an impact. So I'm curious, just on your end, like how should we think about setting, if we're like building a content strategy or setting and refreshing, setting a new one up from the start, how should we be thinking about the things we can do to tie that strategy back to revenue right out of the gate, so we're not scrambling, having to prove our worth and we're playing from behind?
Yeah, I think the number one thing there is like marketers love to, grab a blank notepad or stand up in front of a blank whiteboard and just, let's map out all the opportunity, or jump in right into, an SEO tool and start pulling keyword lists and seeing all that. And I think that that's where you get a lot of wasted cycles. You get a lot of heading down the wrong path. And so I think the number one thing is just, starting with understanding as much as possible about the customers you already have, what's causing them to buy, what are you solving for them, anything with your ideal customer, what are their pain points that your product solves. And really, whether it's blog content, video, podcast, social content, starting with those things that are closely tied to how your product solves their problems, and really, higher intent topics that are more someone trying to understand the solution for what they're trying to do, I think is the number one place to start, regardless of the format, and making sure you're starting there, because that's where you are going to have the most success, versus, hey, I'm going to set out on this 3 to 5 year journey to build a huge audience because I did the math and I figured out that all I have to do is get 1% of that to eventually convert, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In that meantime, like your company's, it needs to hit numbers, and sort of to Amrita's point, like there is long-term, but there's also the short-term needs. And like your company ideally has more channels beyond just content marketing, but you need to know that you are progressing towards the revenue milestones and the growth that the company needs to allow you to have that long-term viability.
One thing that I've noticed about 10 speed, and something that you all help with, and it just makes me very excited because it's my number one favorite topic, and I think biggest opportunity with content marketing, is content distribution. So like what do you think how should content distribution fit into like any modern content strategy? And kind of like, what do you advise people you're working with, like how to get into it, so it's like kind of like that crawl, walk, run approach?
Yeah, for sure. So, similarly, like we do work a lot on the SEO side as well. And so one of the things we're often reminding folks is like organic search is just one single distribution channel. So anytime, you're sitting down saying, we're going to create a bunch of SEO content to rank, like that's no different than saying all we're going to do is social content, whatever. Like you're being too myopic in the approach. And so we really, work to kind of understand, how do we create topics that are highly relevant to your audience, very applicable. They are optimized for search, but there's also very good opportunities to extract the value from that and let that be fuel for many other aspects of marketing across newsletters, social, sales enablement, like a number of different things you can be doing with that. And so I think a couple tips would be, making sure that you're distributing value and not links. So there's not really, it is maybe a fraction better to give someone a fraction better than nothing to give someone a link on Twitter or LinkedIn or something with no context, like just hoping that they'll click and trust you that they'll come read this post. So really need to make sure you're pulling the most valuable points out and do that. And that's why you see people you take a 45-minute podcast episode and pull it down into a 30-second clip, because they're doing the work for others to really highlight the value. And so I think, distribute value, not links. And then also understanding how you're going to distribute before you create the content, I think, is also a really important thing. So in terms of the walk, crawl, run, I think for many people, they simply do not distribute the content. Like
That's right.
they create the content on whatever the format is. If it's a video, maybe they put it on YouTube. If it's a podcast, they publish it. If it's a blog post, they put it on their site. That's it. So crawl is just distribute it in any way other than the main place that you're housing that content. And then I think the walk is where you start to distribute to multiple channels, and you are making sure to tailor some of the content in those channels to the channel. So you're understanding sort of the natural dynamics of each channel and making sure that the content fits that instead of just like a multi distribution from one click. And then I think the run is really where you have an entire distribution playbook, and it includes redistributing long-term. So it's not just we created it, we distribute to a lot of places, but we also have a plan to make sure that ongoing everything that's important is continued to be distributed, potentially repurposed, packaged, things like that.
One thing I just want to amplify that you said is that just do it. Like, chances are your competition is not doing it, and all you have to do is just do it. And just crawling into distribution could send you and your brand, it could cause them to zoom past your competition. So it's simple, but I love it. And that certainly resonates.
Yeah.
I want to get to maybe like the revenue, and I'm sure it varies from, business to business, but like what signals are you looking for to indicate that your content strategy is working from a revenue perspective?
Yeah, I think you can certainly start at the bottom of the funnel and understand sort of opportunities and revenue. And then, with that though, I think there's a big caveat that attribution is never perfect. And content in particular is a highly influential channel in a number of ways. So it's definitely, I would caution purely judging the performance of content by the opportunities and revenue that it generates. But I think if you work your way up, understanding that you have leads, which you could consider free trials or demo requests, whatever it may be for your business, coming from that and be able to kind of look and see at some point perhaps there was some interaction with content. Maybe it wasn't necessarily like the main thing that drove them there. But then beyond that, I think really starts to higher up. I think it becomes into more of the like building an audience, building awareness, building trust. And so certainly you just sort of have the influence that's growing. You have, so like newsletter subscriber lists are growing, which again is sort of that pool that, to Amrita's point, like they're sort of in your ecosystem. You can continue to educate and inform and add value until they're ready to buy. So I think there's a number of things there. And so obviously you can get into impressions across certain channels or audience growth. But I think the big thing, regardless of kind of which metrics or which stage in the process, is really understanding the engagement from your ICP. So it's easy to say, oh, well, some early indicators are impressions or audience growth or anything like that. But it's important to go a layer deeper, have a qualitative understanding of, is that really who you're trying to attract? Because, depending on how you position stuff, how it's, distributed, you could be building an audience, but it's not really the right people. Just similar to like traffic for the sake of traffic, from a blog content or something doesn't really do anything for your business. And so I think that's an important layer that I would say, hey, we know we're in front of the right people. We know we have our target audience engaging. This just strengthens any conversation with the sales. It eventually leads to more like stuff down the funnel, things like that. So I think that would be a couple of big points there.
So many good nuggets in there, Nate. I appreciate it. We got to bring Sangram back on, but We'll hear more from you during question and answer. Talk to you soon, man.
Yep. Thanks.
All right. If you got those questions, going to plug it again. Also, social at Indy McGrath at the Juice HQ. Drop what you're thinking. Would love to see it. Let's bring in Sangram.
Here we go, man. How are you, Brett?
What's up, Sangram? Welcome. How are you? I know you're running 100 miles an hour in every direction. with your new company making things happen, but I'm glad you could be here to drop some knowledge on content ROI today.
Oh man, I love content. And I was like, well, listening to Amrita and Thomas and Nate, I'm like, all right, like I'm getting all these ideas. I'm making comments and notes. So this has been already value for me. So thank you for putting this together.
So I've always observed you, followed you on social, and I've seen you as a leader who has prioritized content. And whether it's, way back, Pardot, Terminus, I'm curious, like, what are the reasons and what's the impact it's had on the businesses that you've worked in?
The best way I think about content, especially LinkedIn, I'm like nowhere to be found on the entire planet except on LinkedIn. So just so y'all know, like I'm not everywhere, or thankfully LinkedIn is still working. It was the easiest way to test new messaging. It was the easiest way, or it is still the easiest way to know where the pulse is. So for example, 2 days ago, I posted something that had a picture that had stuff in there that nobody clicked. And we were thinking like, that would be the greatest message on planet Earth. Let's do go about that. And then after that, I tweaked it and then put something else. And it had 15,000, 20,000 conversations on it. So like, whoa, that has pulse. So in the world where there is so much noise, you got to figure out where is the voice of the marketplace. And if you can find the voice, then you can drive your business forward. So I find that one of the best things we can do from a content perspective is why I have been using it, is to find that voice, not noise, but voice in the marketplace.
I love it. Message testing, see what people are liking, see what people are commenting on. I think the last 6 to 12 months, there's just been undeniable change, and we see the updates just following LinkedIn. And I think it's a time where there's a lot of finger pointing can go on, specifically at marketing, that we're not getting enough leads, not enough pipeline. Leaders look at content. I'm curious, how do you think we should stay on track as content marketers during times, and like we've talked about this a little bit today, but like things we can be doing to develop confidence internally about the content that we're creating and distributing?
Well, I've been guilty of it myself. I've like, when sales don't happen, I'm like, whoa, what are sales doing? They don't know. We have all this content and sales don't know what to close. Or whenever companies have churn issue and I've been part of it, I'm like, whoa, customer success, they can't talk sales. So they can't talk product. So we all have done that. Let's be fair and honest about all of it. It's easy to do. Like I've done that since I was a child, pointing at my brothers and sisters for my problems. But if you really come down to it, and this is as I've started this new venture on go-to-market, I've realized that, and I've been using this as a mantra for every roadshow event that we're doing. And I literally have everybody say that in the room with a loud voice. Here's what we say together. We don't have a marketing problem. We don't have a sales problem. We don't have a CS problem. We don't even have a product problem. What we have is a go-to-market problem. And I say that and everybody laughs and things. But the point is that, look, a lot of times when we say, well, we're not getting enough demand, maybe we're not even positioning. Maybe it's not the right product. Maybe we need to try a new positioning for the product. And a lot of them product could be the answer to the sales problem. So I think we have spent too much time pointing fingers, and I think we all should start saying that what is the go-to-market problem we're solving? And maybe the answer is from another function in your organization, and we just haven't spent enough time together as a team to solve this problem.
So there's the finger pointing. We've all been guilty of that. And so most of us, our go-to-market strategy isn't perfect. There's always gaps. There's always holes, things that we can be doing to improve it. I'm curious, can content play a role in helping fix any of those growing go-to-market problems that we're living in on a day-to-day basis?
In some ways, 100%, but we have to reimagine content. If the content strategy that has been given to you or what you have come up with is, I need to write 3 blog posts a month and do webinars a quarter and do 5 social posts. Well, that's not content. Like that's not what we all are talking about over here. I have so much respect for you and Amrita and Thomas and Nate. I don't think any one of us are actually looking at content that way, and I believe the audience too. We're looking at content like, what do we need to do with this content? We need to really get connected with that. So as an example, when we were working with Snowflake, and they would create a piece of content specifically for a particular vertical, for a particular company, and get that company to move to the next stage. Now that's the level of content marketing, because that's a $500,000 deal that you're talking about. So I think we as content marketers who love, or content creators, I would say, we need to start looking at not volume and impressions and clicks and all those things, but are we moving whatever it is that we are worked on? Maybe it is customer, maybe it is a future customer, maybe it is a pipeline deal, whatever it is, to the next logical stage, what we need to do. And once we all start having that conversation, man, I've seen sales team jump into it and saying, we love you. Man, I've seen CS team come in and say, you know what, this is what I needed. So I think we need to just reimagine what content is, or at least redefine it internally.
I love it. Just in thinking about the tracking of content, I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, and just a struggle in general, is like, we know that the content we're producing consistently does something, but oftentimes it's the questions of like, what is it actually doing and when is it doing it? I'm curious, just in your years of, creating content, working with content marketers, working with marketers, are there any unique content success metrics that you track or think we should be thinking about in order to validate our work?
I've been in so many board meetings, and I'm still am, and I've never seen a content marketing slide on anything yet. Like, I've been on public boards, I've been on private board, I've been on startup board, I've been on nonprofit board. I've never seen a content marketing slide in it. So I think we need to move on from that. But what I've always seen, especially the best one from my days at Salesforce and even early days with Terminus, I've always seen a customer story that brings the conversation together. So we will do something at Pardot and Salesforce. We'll call Show Me the Money slide. Like, this was our favorite thing to do. The Show Me the Money slide was, we pick a customer that closed last month or last quarter and show their entire journey from all the different things they did. Oh, they downloaded a content, they attended a webinar, then they have 2 sales calls or 5 sales calls, then they talk to so-and-so executive, then they talk to a customer. So we're showing the entire journey of that customer that led to close. And the more you look at it, you realize that there is no silver bullet here. There is no one thing that solves. What you start seeing is that all of these things work for different types of persona at a different time and place, and you start figuring that out. So what works for us as a content creators are those stories that tell the full what has happened, as opposed to, well, here's our content, the ultimate guide to so and so. Okay, well, great, good job, good for you. Who else read it? Not even your own team reads sometimes. Canada. Let's be honest.
I love it. There's a guy who wrote a book about go-to-market strategies, has content at the top of your brain, and now is running a business around go-to-market. Sangram, this is fun. We're going to bring everyone back up because I want to make sure we hit some of these questions we got during this conversation, which I'm looking at now, and there looks like a lot of good ones. So, Kat, can we bring the rest of the group back up?
Seems like Amrita already wants to go gloves off and jump on. Let's do it.
I'm going to throw, we got one from Julia, and she has a question about forums, and this is what a great topic to talk about. So let's just talk about forums. Like, she notices some people are dropping forums, but it makes other things difficult, like retargeting, tracking. Like, maybe we can go around the horn. Like, should we get rid of forums? Is there a balance? Like, Amrita, I know you've been waiting the longest and you probably have an opinion on this. So maybe we'll start with you.
I'd say keep them, but use them strategically. You use them in the part of the funnel where you best need them. We at Superside, it makes sense for us to use them kind of like not right at the top of the funnel, but like almost like your first time visit, and you've gotten value, let's say on LinkedIn or what have you, right? Like kind of like Nate said, and then maybe you've come to our site and maybe you've actually landed on a content offer. That's usually where we pop up the forum, and that's where we cookie you. And then after that, everything else is home free. So we use it strategically. I'm not an advocate of dropping forums. I think that our privacy regulations and the walled gardens that have gone up have made things substantially more difficult, and it is what it is. And this is the game we're playing, and we're here to make money. And content marketing, again, is not just about brand. So yeah, generally I feel like keep it up, but don't go, buck wild on it.
Other thoughts?
Well, I'll just drop this since Amrita is like all over on this. Like, oh, I want to hear more on where do we disagree, because that's the best part. But I do where I see it's interesting is when somebody comes to your website, you have done your job. Nobody's come to the website because, oh, let me go search something because they have time. Nobody comes like that. So majority of the time, if somebody's coming to the website, you have done your job of getting them to your website. So give them the freaking demo, give them the whatever they need to know, and move them forward, because they're not going to be shy about it. The problem is people drive with ads and everything to the website. And now when you drive people through paid ads and like forcefully on your website, then they're like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. So the example that Amrita shared in the beginning was a classic example of that person wants to buy. Like, give that person the demo and move them forward.
Yeah, I think there's just a need to... Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, Nate. No, I just wanted to add to it in the sense of, I think we as content marketers are used to a situation where we overuse forms. So I would say reduce the amount of forms you use, ungate content, provide more value for free, but definitely use it strategically, as Amrita put it. So looking at privacy first regulations and all that's to come, we definitely want first party data, right, as marketers. So I wouldn't say you should lose them entirely.
And like I'll just add that one thing to look at is like your drop off on the page. You know, you can test this very easily and turn it on and off depending on the channel that people are coming in from. So sometimes when people come in organically, we don't have a form. When they come in through paid, they have a form, very short form, right? So there's nuances there as well. There's like a really great landing page that we have that has something like 50% conversion. It's a gated guide about the dysfunctions between marketing and design. And we thought like no one would care about this, but apparently a lot of people do. So when we realized that, we put the form up, right? And it still has 50% conversion, and we are okay with that trade-off. So it's almost like you kind of have to do the math of like what each lead is worth to you. And are you okay leaving that money on the table and grab them another way? That's the way I think about it, at least.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you know, when the like conversation around ungate content really started, I think that was also just a different time when people weren't proactively sharing as much value on social and in other channels. And so it was very much the default. We have something, we're going to put it behind this form. And so I think a little bit that's shifted. I wouldn't, you know, entirely ungate everything, but I think the biggest thing is just making sure you're being thoughtful about the value behind that. And so to that last point, Amrita, like there's clearly demand and value there for someone, but just having something that was basically a designed version of a 400-word blog post, but you made someone exchange a lot of information does not make sense.
Yeah. And they'll just leave dissatisfied with your brand anyway. And they'll be like, oh my God, I gave my email away for this thing, even though they probably do it for like a $2 coupon all the time.
I want to hit this question before we get out of here, because I'm sure you all have different opinions, and I know you all have various levels of experience. But this one from Leo, and Nate, maybe we'll start with you, is what type of content should every SaaS company publish in the early days? Like high intent keywords, alternatives. Like, what's your perspective on like day one startup, the type of content that we should be building?
So I think the interesting thing here is that your company typically knows what that is, because that's the narrative. It's the origin story of your product. There's a reason that you built the product in the first place. And then there's the narrative around why we think there's opportunity here. We are solving pain with this product. You maybe did that for fundraising. So there's a lot there that just sometimes doesn't quite get translated into content. And so I think that's really the starting point, is just really focusing on like, not a like, hey, why we exist or why we started the company, but hitting on those pain points. And then I think, you know, inside with that is also just understanding from the start, you have a pretty good idea of who your buyer is, and you then know like, where are they spending time? Where do they consume? Is it, you know, conferences, podcasts, whatever it may be, and making sure you don't have endless bandwidth. So let's start with the formats that are going to be most likely relevant to them at the beginning.
Who else has an opinion on this?
I would challenge that. I would say no content. If we look at day one, you should not publish public content. You should go talk to your prospects, to your customers. also as a marketer, you should, maybe your first content is an email to your prospects, is something on the sales enablement side of things. But
yeah,
as a content marketer, I would say it's not a blog post. It's not something public.
Yeah, I guess day one means many different things, but yeah, day one you usually don't know shit, so it's like, what are you publishing?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't interpreting it that way, but that's a fair point.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, can I turn this around and ask a question? Like, everybody says, like, especially like for startups, like, start with search. Always start with search. There's always like some latent demand somewhere, and you want to capture that as quickly as possible and not be late to the party and all of that. That's changed, right?
I'll just share, like, at the Juice early days, I didn't even think about search when I was creating content. It was, how do we share our point of view? How do we cut out our side of the market where we've got a small group of people who are understanding what we're saying and just tell stories, and not disregarding search, not disregarding keywords and the power of SEO. Now we're to the point where it's like, we need to get sophisticated around there. But early days at the Juice was just like, let's tell stories that we think will resonate with the type of people that we want to be using our product.
Yeah. We do have the opportunity to talk to and work with a lot of very early stage companies. And I would say it's not the first thing happening, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a good establishment. There's some product market fit. There's some understanding of different channels and what actually drives customer acquisition and some of that before you're really ever getting that. And oftentimes other, types of content or content channels before getting into it. Yeah.
What I've seen is like Demandwell, which is an indie right now. They're an SEO company up there. And what was interesting, because they're one of our customers, is they're able to see where the market demand is from an intent perspective. So it actually has helped their company and their customers to figure out what to focus on, where the problem is. And then on the flip side, there's Pat Factory, Hushly, what's the other one? There's several, like all of these, they're all, again, our customers. So we're able to see the content, the things that actually have hubs that they're creating, and people are spending a lot more time on those hubs, and their time on site has gone tremendously up when you create that experience, as opposed to just a blog post experience. It's more of like, well, I know what you are looking for, and I got all of that now all of a sudden in front of you. That actually does work, and it can go hand in hand with the SEO part of it.
This has been a ton of fun, and I know we're trying to be mindful of everyone's time. I want to thank you all for your participation. We've got one more slide to share. Kat, if you might throw that up as we close this out. So just what's next to everyone who is out there, we're going to be following up with the recording tomorrow. So you'll get that in your inbox if you had to leave, or you want to see the full thing. We're going to start a new event series much like this, but it's going to be quick hits, about 30 minutes, called Content Distribution Live. If you are interested in this and you enjoyed this format, we're going to be doing one more specifically around content distribution. So be on the lookout for that. And we are launching a new product next week, Smarter Distribution. That's going to be happening on Thursday. Just follow the Juice. You're going to hear more. I want to thank Sangram, Amrita, Nate, Thomas. This was a ton of fun. Really excited about what you all had to say. And I know I'm thinking about things a little bit differently. So appreciate your time, and audience, everyone out there listening. Thank you so much. Hope you gained some value from this conversation today.
Thanks all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.